Hello, this is Richard Teather speaking to you for the Free Market Roadshow. Sadly, I cannot be there in person this year, but hopefully this recording will be of use. What is the effect of the virus and the lockdown on government finances, and how is the government response going to help or hinder that? Obviously, there's been a huge increase in the deficit because of the coronavirus and the government responses to that. First, a big increase in public health costs. Second, a huge decrease in economic activity, GDP, because of the lockdown, the closures. The government has shut a lot of businesses, put restrictions on many more, so there is a lot less economic activity, a lot less employment, and therefore, from the government's point of view, a lot less tax revenue as well. But third, there has also been a lot more expenditure by the government trying to respond to the lockdowns, trying to help, trying to increase subsidies for businesses, increase support for businesses, and increased welfare costs. All of this has increased government spending at a time when tax revenues are falling, and the effect on government finances has been huge. Countries in Europe are looking at 10 to 15% of GDP as deficits, so enormous losses, enormous levels of borrowing. And as we start to come out of the lockdowns, at least here in Britain, and we start to hopefully see the end of the problems, the governments are looking for a response to this, are looking for a solution, are looking for what they do next. Sadly, it looks like they've taken the wrong decision. Instead of trying to reduce spending back to earlier levels, instead of trying to balance their finances that way, governments are looking at increasing taxes. And particularly, they're looking at increasing taxes on businesses, companies, both businesses in general and a lot of innovative businesses, particularly online and electronic businesses. There's a big problem with that. The governments see this as a helpful way that they can collect tax from businesses without increasing the tax on their voters, and therefore they think this is a painless way of balancing their finances. Sadly, it doesn't work like that. One thing that we know in economics is that if you tax businesses, you get less investment, less business activity, fewer new business startups, and most importantly for most of us, fewer jobs. I've looked at governments across Europe, I've done the comparisons, we can see that very clearly. And there's a big cut-off. Once government spending goes above about 42%, suddenly the economy's ability to generate jobs, to grow, falls off a cliff. Below 42% spending, most economies in Europe manage to grow reasonably well, manage to generate jobs at 10% or more growth. Above 42%, that almost stops. There is almost no country in Europe that manages to have high levels of tax, but also successful economic growth. And now, who does this hurt? Yes, it hurts potentially everybody. Anyone can lose their jobs, and a lot of people have lost their jobs over the virus and the shutdowns. But mostly this affects people who are trying to find new jobs. It's a lot of the people in work are protected, or the government provides subsidies to employers or help to try and keep them in work. But what they can't do and don't do is help the jobs that are never created. And that's a real problem for people who have either lost their job and are looking for a new one, or particularly for a lot of the listeners here, people who are leaving school, leaving university and looking for their first jobs as well. That's a real problem because we've already had a generation of people who have suffered in their education, who've had restrictions, lockdowns and so on. And now they're trying to move on to the next stage, trying to start their careers, and also they're going to find that there are no jobs to be had or very few. And it's not as if a lot of countries were starting from a good position. We've had major countries in Europe, France, Italy, Spain, with massive youth unemployment, 20-30% even before the virus. If we start increasing taxes on employment, taxes on business, taxes on investment, if we start having fewer jobs, those people are going to have even less chance of getting anything going once this is all over. And less chance of starting up new businesses as well, because there's a lot, once taxes are rising, there's a lot fewer businesses started up. You lose that entrepreneurial culture, you lose that growth in the economy. Now, is this just theory? No, it's not. It's one of the things that really works in practice. It's one of the few things about tax economics that we actually know. There's a story I like to tell that illustrates this in a very small way. I hate doing gardening. I don't like cutting the grass. I don't like digging the soil. What I want to do in the garden is sit down with a glass of wine. Okay, so what I can do then, I can sit in the garden, I can write an article or record a lecture about tax, I can get paid for doing that, and with the money I can pay a professional gardener to cut the grass. That way everybody's happy. Yeah. I get to do something that I prefer doing. I much prefer talking about tax to labouring in the garden. The gardener gets a job, but also it spills out from that. When the gardener has finished working here, he goes to the bar and buys a drink on his way home. Providing money, that provides work for the bar staff in the bar, provides work for the employer. My writing an article provides, well, hopefully something good for people to read, but also something that the magazine likes, something to fill in the space, something that the advertisers hopefully like. They advertise as well, and the whole economy ripples out from that, and we get more and more growth, more and more jobs. And that works because I can earn enough money in a couple of hours to pay for a gardener for a couple of hours, because I'm better at writing about tax than I am about cutting the grass. Until tax comes along. And then suddenly the money that I get from writing an article about tax is reduced by those taxes that I have to pay. And the money that the gardener wants, he wants to take home a certain amount, but I have to pay him more because some of that's going in tax. And it's not just income tax, it's social security, it's VAT, it's all these other things. And suddenly I'm not earning enough money by writing about my article in order to pay somebody to cut the grass. So it becomes more sensible for me to stop writing articles and to cut the grass myself. Now that's no good for anybody. It's no good for me because I hate doing it. It's no good for the gardener because he loses his job. It's no good for the garden because really I'm terrible at doing that. It's no good for the barmaid in the bar because the gardener's no longer stopping off on his way back from cutting my grass to go and have a drink. It's no good for the magazine because they don't have an article to put in the magazine. It's no good for the readers, they don't have anything to read. It's no good for the advertisers, they don't want to advertise in a magazine with no content. And it's no good for the government as well, because although they've increased the tax rates, they're not collecting any tax, because I'm not earning the money, I'm not paying the gardener, he's not earning the money, the bar isn't selling the drink, the barmaid isn't paying tax on her income. All of these things, it ripples through and you start losing all that money all down the line. So it's bad for the government and it's bad for the economy, and most importantly bad for people as well, and bad for my garden. There have been studies about this, and there was a big one particularly by Oxford University a few years ago that found that if you taxed companies, if you increase the taxes on companies, 85% of the tax collected is actually paid for by the workforce in terms of lower jobs, lower wages, fewer jobs, less employment opportunity. And that's a real problem. And what we're seeing here is, as the governments come out of the lockdowns, come out of shutdowns, and are looking for ways to solve their public finances, if they start increasing taxes, and especially if they start increasing taxes on business and investment, that's going to really hit jobs. And yes, of course, my example's only a tiny one. That's only a very small scale. But that's being repeated on millions of occasions all across the country, all across Europe. And it's those adding up, it's the combined effect of those that get you that massive hit in jobs, that get you this collapse in the economy or restriction, the lack of growth in the economy, the lack of new opportunities for unemployed people, or most importantly for school leavers, university graduates, and which are really going to damage the prospects of people all across the continent. We've already seen things were not good before we hit the virus. And yes, the virus has caused problems. The lockdowns, the shutdowns, the closures have caused problems. What we don't want to do is compound all of those problems by having the governments do foolish tax rises to try and bring in more money, try and balance their books, which are just going to harm the economy, harm tax revenues, but most importantly, harm people and reduce their life chances and opportunities.